Hello and welcome to another video and podcast from fantasyfootballscout.co.uk. My name is David and today we are continuing our series of FPL team reveals where we go around the brightest and best in the fantasy community to find out who's in the first drafts of those managers. And today I am very delighted to be joined by the man himself, Gianni Butticè. We have a bit of a rivalry sometimes when it comes to Gameweek 39, Team North versus Team South. I think this is the first time we've spoken to each other since then. I'm going to guess you're feeling pretty smug.
Yeah, mate, I am. It was a wonderful day. It does seem like so long ago though, and it coincides nicely. I mean, that was game week 39. Game week 38 was obviously the conclusion of the FPL season, and again, feels like a lifetime ago. So it's been nice to have the summer break. I completely switched off to any content or whatever. I think in the month of June, and now come July, the game was launched, and already I'm enjoying it, and I'm ready for a new season. So yeah, all good, mate.
Yeah, well, you've done the right thing there. It's always good to switch off a bit, isn't it? Because then you've got that energy and enthusiasm for the new campaign. But I do have to ask you about how you finished last season and just generally, what sort of position you're used to finishing in FPL. An opportunity for you to tell people why we should be taking your word for it on some of these players.
Yeah, thanks, mate. I'm just checking out my rank as we speak because it got to the point where I was like, I don't care if I finish 180,000 or 80,000. Like, it wasn't hitting the target I wanted. So I kind of got to the point where I was playing fairly loose, which I enjoyed. So I finished the season at 84,000. And I think that was actually a couple of big green arrows towards the end of the season. I think I was around the 100k mark for a while. And then I had the game week 36, I think it was, when Newcastle were the double. I went Captain Wilson, didn't own Isak. And that was obviously a big swing for those that went Wilson and went against Isak, who was the popular option. So it was a good end to the season, despite having a kind of disappointing rank. It didn't beat the season before that was 16k. And I always think with FPL, we should aim to beat our previous season. It's probably what a lot of football teams would say in the league. Let's do better than last year. And I don't beeline towards got to have a 50k or a 10k rank, because I always think the way the game's growing, that's often unachievable and unrealistic, knowing there's so many more engaged managers and also so many managers. You know, we're recording this a week after the launch of the game and there's already 1.5 million managers signed up. Like, this game is huge. So for me, it's about beating last year. And I didn't do that. I went from 16k to 84k. It does, however, mean I've got a good chance of beating 84k next season. So yeah, fingers crossed on that one.
Yeah, fingers crossed, absolutely. I mean, I agree with you. I mean, you always want to try and progress on from where you were before, and it is a lot harder to place value on the raw figures, I suppose, of exactly where you finish. The game is growing at an exponential rate, and so as long as you can finish in a bracket of sorts or percentile or something like that, I think that is the way to go. So yeah, fingers crossed for that. Now we're going to jump into your team in just 1 second, but before we do, it is the start of a new season, and of course the game has been around relaunched for about a week. Now is the best time for you guys to make sure that you're signed up to Fantasy Football Scout membership, because you can save up to 30% on those preseason prices. The preseason is the best time to have Scout membership, and I say that as someone who used to just be a punter, then worked in editorial, then left and used it as a punter again, and then come back as someone to work on it for video. I've seen it from all angles. In the preseason especially, it's fantastic. The preseason guide is invaluable. It's going to help you find the new Aaron Wan-Bissaka, the new John Lundstrom before everybody else, because it's the only place where you can have the preseason minutes tracked for you. Points projections, transfer planners, and drafts from the best fantasy managers as well. All sorts of fantastic benefits. Make sure you sign up now before the start of the campaign and make the most of it. But yes, Gianni, let's have a look at your team. And I imagine that some of the benefits we've talked about probably helped fuel what we've got in front of us here. There's a lot of light blue, I have to say, which is really exciting to see. I'm going to list it off just as a list for the benefit of the podcast listeners, and then we're going to dive into my favourite talking point in your team. So it's Ramsdale and Areola as the goalkeepers, Estupiñán, Alexander-Arnold and Ake as the starting back three, Saka and Burmo and Foden in midfield alongside Rashford and Mitoma, Jesus and Haaland up front, and then a substitutes bench of Colwill, Bell and Archer. Now, I have to come straight away to Phil Foden. I don't think I've seen any drafts yet where there is a Man City attacker outside of Haaland. You are the very first to come on the YouTube channel and the podcast and offer that up. So talk me through it, my friend. It's very exciting to see.
Mate, the fixtures for Man City, like, you look at the scout ticker over 4, 6, 10 game weeks. I think if you're looking at 4 and 6 game weeks, And I only think we should look that far with the ticker because so often we don't plan to wildcard in game week 4 or 5 or 6, but so often we do. And therefore, let's not look at game week 8, 9, and 10 and worry about that too much. So when I look, 8, 9, and 10, ironically, City play Arsenal, Brighton, and United. But to start the season, let's have a look at their first 7 games. It's Burnley, yes, please. Newcastle's tricky in game week 2, but then it's Sheffield United, Fulham, West Ham, and Forest and Wolves. Like, if I'm looking at ceiling, there are no better team to back in terms of high ceiling and potential 3, 4, 5-0 victories. And therefore, knowing Haaland's going to be 84% owned-ish, and he'll be all of our captains, we're not going to gain much by having Haaland only in our team if they go on a 4 or 5-0. And we'll see a couple of 4-5-0ers, I think. Therefore, the Man City defence needs covering, in my opinion, but also the Man City attack more than Haaland. Now, the million-dollar question is, who do you back? Because KDB's 10.5, we just can't stretch to him if we're looking at the sort of drafts we're seeing. Therefore, it's got to be one of the 3 7.5 million mids. Now, if Bernardo Silva gets sold, Mahrez becomes a really good option. Grealish is still a good option. We know that from last year. He's 7.5. But the most fun of all for me is Phil Foden, 7.5. Knowing that they've lost Gundogan, there's been a lot of talk that we'll see Foden playing in the Foden role, which 3-4 years ago when he was breaking through, the Foden role was kind of in that midfield 3, almost as a kind of box-to-box or kind of more creative force in that middle. So a number 8 or a number 10 in the midfield 3. Now, Gundogan has played that role a lot. And there's a little bit of space now in the City team. There's no David Silva, no Gundogan. And will Foden finally get his chance to play that role? If he does, sure, he's not false 9 or wide left or wide right, where we've seen him in years gone by where he's been great. But it might just mean he's a little bit more nailed and gets more of those minutes. I know they've brought in Kovacic. And again, Kovacic could be like for Gundogan, but often plays a little bit deeper. I just think Foden's potentially going to get the minutes come game week 1, and pre-season and the tracker on Scout will be really valuable for this. If I don't see what I need to see come game week 1 in those pre-season minutes, then perhaps he won't be in this game week 1 team. But at the moment, I think he's the most fun and potentially offers the most upside. Even though he's further from the goal in the midfield 3, he'll still be super attacking, as we've seen with Kevin De Bruyne, who, by the way, is flagged. I think we probably don't know too much about that hamstring injury just yet that he picked up in the Champions League final. But with De Bruyne out as well, if he is, again, more routes to the team for Foden.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, with De Bruyne, it's the last I heard was that there's a chance he's going to miss the start of the season, but start of the season was a very nebulous concept that I suppose could mean anything between 1 to 4, 5, 6 game weeks. So right now, the way things appear, it does appear that there's perhaps an extra slot in there. I suppose my next question was actually going to be, is Foden a placeholder for some of those other guys? You've kind of already answered that already, I suppose. There's lots of if, buts and maybes in terms of Silva and perhaps maybe where we see Kovacic play. I suppose you'd be open to switching to a Grealish or Mahrez or someone else similarly priced in the City midfield if the pre-season pushed you in that direction.
Yeah, Mahrez especially, because we know with Mahrez, if he's getting minutes and starts, he's an absolute gift in FPL. And if Bernardo Silva is sold and not directly replaced, then surely that Mahrez right-hand side that slot will feel a little bit like Grealish last season, where you kind of go 8 of every 10 given game weeks, you're confident he's starting. That's what we saw with Grealish. 8, 9 game weeks out of 10, you were like, yeah, he's safe. People will always come back to Pep Roulette and rotation risk with City players. But it's a little bit of a misconception. When you look at that Pep team from last season, there were a lot of nailed Man City assets. Grealish was one when they were fit. And often you'll look at the minutes and go, oh, he's not nailed because he missed 4 or 5 games out of 10 game weeks. But you're like, yeah, but he had injuries. Ake is a prime example of that. When Ake was fit, certainly for the second half of last season, he was nailed, but he did miss games through injury. So people will perhaps look at that, not spend too much time on it and go, oh, he's a rotation risk. Well, any player can get injured,
Yeah, that's very true. I mean, I agree with you, actually, that especially in the early part of the season, Pep Roulette is less dangerous than you think, because there's some decent numbers to back that up that the editorial guys at Scout picked out a few weeks ago. I can't remember them exactly off the top of my head, unfortunately, but the general gist was in the first part of the campaign before the European football really starts to kick in, there was something like 7 or 8 players that started every game, and that's a lot for a City team. And yes, they've got the Super Cup, but to be honest, they can probably manage that fairly easily because they've got their first game is away on a Friday night, and it's not a long trip. It's just up the road to Burnley for them. So, they're going to be back and preparing again for the Super Cup perhaps on Sunday. And then, then on the turnaround again, it's a Wednesday after a Friday and then another weekend. That's not too bad. And then they've got 2, 3, and 4 all just in exactly the lineup schedule wise that they're going to want. I think there's EFL Cup involved, but I imagine they're probably not involved in the earliest round because the bigger clubs don't necessarily always get involved. Off the top of my head, I don't know if they're involved in the first round, but even if they are, he's just going to play the kids. So it means that in those first 4 especially, we can probably get an accurate picture of who's going to start. And obviously I love De Bruyne, but if we get confirmation that he's out for 4, 5, 6 game weeks, that would be helpful, because then you can feel a bit more confident going for some of these guys. And you make a very compelling case. And the fact that that no one's really interested in City at the moment outside of Haaland because of rotation, you can potentially capitalise on I guess the knowledge gap / misconception that other people are having and maybe benefit from it.
That's exactly it, mate. And the 7.5 mids, like we're getting a route to the best attack in the league for 7.5 for a front 3 player. It feels too good to be true, and I'm surprised I haven't seen more drafts with City. And I know why I haven't. It's the fear of rotation. But yeah, as you say, start the season, it's much safer. It's second half of the season you have to worry about with mass rotation at Man City. And remember, Pep has a small squad. He likes a slimline squad. There's not a huge amount of risks to the nailed guys. There's a core base there. It's at 14, 15 players that get all the minutes. Unlike, you look at Chelsea last season, or you look at Man United at times, you're like, there's 20 players there. They can all get minutes. But at the moment, and the way Pep likes to manage, it's a slim squad.
Yeah, definitely. Well, speaking of a slim squad, yours is actually the opposite of that, but you've got lots of quality here because of one very important absence, and that is, of course, no Mohamed Salah. Now, you are not alone, so don't worry. You are not, going on an outlier here. I don't have Salah. Basically, everybody else I've done these videos with doesn't have Salah. But I have to ask everybody the question, just how committed are you to that format? Have you tried a Salah draft? Were you unhappy with what that meant for the rest of the team? And can you see yourself changing your mind between now and game week 1? And I have to say, the answers so far have been very mixed. Some people are like, nope, I'm sticking without him. And others are like, I might change my mind. So where do you fall on that scale?
I'm pretty set, mate. I mean, look, for context, I made this draft on day 1 of the launch, and it hasn't changed since. I'm not one to tinker a lot. So yes, I will have a few different versions of this draft come game week 1, but I like to just make a draft, sit on it for a week or 2. So look, in a few days' time or in a week's time, I might have a little tinker. The things that whilst I haven't put it in and press those confirm buttons, the things I've been thinking about on this draft are potentially going without any Liverpool whatsoever. I'm kind of 50-50 on that. So the question for me isn't Salah, yes or no. I'm set there. It will be no Salah because the money, and there's too many other good midfield options. The question will be, do I go Trent, yes or no? And that is the one I'm on the fence with. So I think there is a chance I see no Trent, and that's, say, a Reece James or a Ben Chilwell, and then even more money in that midfield where there's just amazing options. So I'm pretty set on the no Salah, mate. Pre-season, he could go and get hat-tricks in lots of games, show us he's still on penalties when McAllister and Szoboszlai are still on the pitch. And still, I don't think I would go there. If the fixtures were brilliant, maybe I would. But the fixtures are the reason why I'm tempted to go without any Liverpool whatsoever, because Chelsea game week 1 is tough. And yes, Bournemouth game week 2, Salah is going to be the best captaincy option in FPL game week 2. Haaland has Newcastle. But then it's Newcastle and Villa, 2 really difficult teams. And yeah, Wolves, okay, but it's at Molineux. And then West Ham, Spurs, Brighton. It's a really, really tough start. And actually, I think some of the tickers are a little bit out with how tricky Liverpool's start is.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I mean, it's the Villa game especially. I mean, for example, at the moment, we've got it as a kind of like light-ish blue, but a European team, they're no joke, and they've made some good signings. West Ham kind of the same. They're obviously going to lose Declan Rice, but, I do think that there's a lot for West Ham to prove from last season because they really shouldn't have been anywhere near the situation they were in, for example. So there's a lot of teams with points to prove they're going to face. Liverpool's defence also hasn't been amazing, and games could get away from them because their control of those games, they let them slip. We saw that a lot last season, and well, without wanting to inflate your fan ego, I also think Chelsea are going to be really good this year. And so then opening with Chelsea game week 1, I mean, that's a tough game. So I could totally understand why you're turned off by those fixtures. We'll talk a bit more about Trent in a minute when we talk about defence. But yeah, it's I think I'm relatively set on no Salah as well, and it's simply because, and you've mentioned it there as well, just with the captaincy, it's like he is only worth captaining in one of the first 6. So therefore, do you break your team to do that? Not really, because do you fancy Haaland at home against Newcastle? It just sounds like an easy question.
Yeah, like I'm still fine with that. And those Liverpool fixtures, I know I'd said they were difficult, but just going through them in a little bit more detail now, I'm like, 5 of the 8 are away from home. I didn't quite realise that, because with Liverpool, I often think it doesn't matter who they're playing. If they're at Anfield, that'll still be goals. But 5 of the 8 are away from home. So again, like even more reasons to be put off a little bit by Liverpool. 5 away out of 8. It's a tricky run. And also, that midfield 3 is going to be completely different next season and might take a little bit of time to settle in. So again, I think there's a 50-50 chance I'll have no Liverpool in my lineup whatsoever. And I do think there's good Liverpool options, don't get me wrong. Like Trent and Salah are going to get you tons of points. It's just the money you have to spend to get there. And then sure, there could be some hidden gems. If Darwin or Jota are starters, 7.5 Darwin up front or midfield out of position Jota, 8 million, I think they're both great options because they are big chance hoggers. But I think it'll be Luis Diaz and Hakpo, and Salah will be the front 3 to start game week 1. So again, we need to know who that first choice front 3 is going to be, because at the moment it's Salah plus 2, and the 2 feel like they'll probably be Hakpo and Luis Diaz, who arguably are worse FPL options than Darwin and Jota. So I'm happy to swerve them for the time being, I think.
Yeah, I know what you mean. There is so much to settle there. There's just so many things that they could do differently. I mean, I was just having a read of the scout report on Szoboszlai this morning because I'm going to sort out a video on him as well, and the predicted lineup that they were trying to put together in an attempt to sort of help us understand where he was going to fit in.
Is it 4-2-3-1?
They went for a 3-2-2-3, which had obviously Trent and Fabinho as the the 2 6s, I suppose, to help you understand the geography of them, because Trent isn't a 6, but in that area. Then Szoboszlai and McAllister perhaps as the number 8s, and then Diaz, Hakpo, and Salah across the front. But there's just so many different players that could come in and out of that. It could be a 4-2-3-1, could be a 4-3-3-3. So it is a bit of a lottery until we start seeing some preseason games. So I totally understand that reticence to sort of like buy in right now, when who knows what impact all those different players are going to have. The impact could be beneficial. Alternatively, do you remember when Klopp used to not like having all 4 of his attackers on the pitch at once?
It was 3 of the 4 always, wasn't it?
Yeah, and when he had the 4, they were kind of like treading on each other's toes, and he just got in the way of each other and actually made their attack worse. And sometimes when I play 7-a-side football on a Tuesday night, there's one guy who plays left wing like me, and if we're on the same team, it's just rubbish, like because we just get in each other's way. So
you go to the same zones on the pitch, just naturally navigate towards the same areas, and we could see that. Mate, Szoboszlai is going to be a really interesting one with how he fits, and he likes that right-hand channel. So I look forward to seeing your video. Also, his penalty record. Have you seen? I think he scored 12 of 13. So him and McAllister both have better penalty records than Salah. But interestingly, check out his pens. I'm pretty sure from all 13 of his league pens or professional pens, I heard on TalkSport the other day, so worth checking the stats on this, he's gone the same side every single time. How funny. Wow. Like, he's literally put the ball to the keeper's right. So he shoots across his body every single pen. So 13 out of 13 and 1 was saved.
Wow, incredible. Well, I mean, the penalties is a conversation that we have had also with McAllister as well. I mean, we think that Salah will probably keep it, but he has got more competition. He's got more competition than before. So that's the main point, isn't it? Is there's just competition for all sorts of roles in that team, and I can understand why you're put off by it for sure. But you've mentioned obviously away fixtures. A team that has 4 at home in the first 6 is Arsenal, which is where we start with your goalkeeper, which is Ramsdale. He's 5 million, so he's not priced in a traditional box. We like to either have a 4.5, or if we're going to commit, we like a 5.5. 5 million is obviously halfway between that, but I mean, he offers pretty good value at the start of the season, I guess.
Yeah, I think I'll go for the budget option of Areola and Fabianski, them both, or it will be a 5 million and Areola. I think I'm not sold on any of the 4.5 options. I don't love a Pickford or a Leno. And I think the 5 million options are so much better that are worth the extra point 0.5. I guess I need to know if Areola is a number one, and we think he's going to be the number one, and at the moment that feels sort of 50-50, then maybe I could go Areola in a 4.5 with a good rotation. But at the moment, if Areola's a bench player, then Ramsdale at 5 million feels so good. And I know Gabriel, if you're spending 5 million, you get a little bit more from Gabriel because the goal threat is so good. The problem with Gabriel for me is there's so many defenders I like. And I look at this team and think, if Trent was to go, I probably wouldn't want to fill it with Gabriel. I'd want to fill it with a Chelsea defender, for example. So that's where I settled on Ramsdale. But outside of Ramsdale, Kepa's 5 million. Could look at him, although there will be routes to that Chelsea backline for 4.5, like Fofana or Colwill, depending on who starts. And Emi Martinez is also 5 million. I think we forget how good Emi Martinez can be for FPL. And Villa, under Unai Emery, had a really impressive defensive record. So again, he's one I may consider if I go for a Gabriel option or if I go triple Arsenal attack, because Saka, Jesus, Martinelli is on my mind as a triple attack. But at the moment, Ramsdale was just the easy sort of go-to pick. And I made this draft before I saw the template, before I saw other people's drafts. And it's funny because the draft I made on day one that we're looking at now does feel very boring and very template. And someone said to me yesterday, it's a good draft. I'll give it 9 out of 10. They're commenting on my YouTube video, but it's not very Gianni. And I looked at it and thought, yeah, you're probably a bit right there. And maybe just by taking Trent out and going triple Arsenal attack straight away, I've made it a little bit more Gianni, which is where I'll probably end up. But yeah, for the time being, Ramsdale's in. You definitely want triple Arsenal, though. I think I'll 100% be in that camp. I will have 3 Arsenal players one way or another. The fixtures are too good. The prices are too good.
Yeah, I mean, just going over those fixtures in more detail, it's Forest at home game week 1. I mean, that's, in a way, all you need to know, to be honest. I mean, Forest were awful away from home last season. Palace away game week 2, Fulham at home game week 3, United at home game week 4, Everton away game week 5, and Spurs at home game week 6. And the thing is, I can understand the interest in triple Arsenal attack because I've said Forest and Fulham at the Emirates feels like a heavy win for Arsenal. Then United and Spurs coming along. I mean, you could see Arsenal maybe struggling to win it, but at the very least it could be a 2-2 or 3-3, something like that. The North London derby especially is always chaos. It's my favourite derby as a neutral because Reading's derbies don't normally get too near the television. So watching the North London derby I do really enjoy because it's just, the form book is just irrelevant and it's always just a barnstorming basketball match. So, you know, having attackers in that game could be very exciting. So, yeah, I totally understand the interest. And Praz at the moment has 3 Arsenal attackers. So you'd be in good company if you went that way.
I would be. So he must have no... Because if you go 3 Arsenal attackers, it's usually... Oh, I've not put the draft together, but I'm looking at it going, if I go 3 Arsenal attackers, it would be... Say it would be one of my 6.5 mids up to Martinelli. And if I do that, that means no Trent. So that's what I'm thinking about. If I go no Trent, there's a good chance I go triple Arsenal attack. And I'm guessing that's what, as Praz got no Trent.
Yeah, I think that was, I mean, I've seen so many drafts, unfortunately, off the top of my head, can't exactly remember, but he made a very compelling case, very similar to yourself, about reasons to be a bit concerned about Liverpool. So yeah, it is something you would have to, you know, downgrade in other areas, but it doesn't seem necessarily like a bad thing to do because there's a similar principle here with your views on Man City. Everyone's going to have Haaland, and so how can you turn a shield of Haaland, because everyone's going to have him, protecting himself, into a sword of, like, when those goals go in, they actually benefit you. And so because a lot of people are going to have 2 Arsenal attackers, by getting a third one, you will probably get more green arrows out of Arsenal doing what you expect them to, which is to score lots of goals at home. And at the same time, you also save yourself the hard decisions, because deciding between the Arsenal attackers this season is really difficult, to be honest. Martinelli, Ødegaard, Saka, and maybe even Havertz as well. I mean, I don't think he'll necessarily be in the conversation game week 1, but I honestly think there'll be a time this season where I end up owning Havertz for 3 or 4 game weeks with, like, good reason, rather than doing it sort of like for a stupid sort of throwaway differential punt. I mean, I don't know what you think there. I mean, you're obviously a Chelsea fan. You've seen him perhaps play not in his favoured position, but you know, I think the move to Arsenal is good for him. Do you think that maybe he might creep in at some point to your team?
I mean, I own Havertz a lot. in the last 2 seasons. Like I had Havertz over Watkins last year, which is where I really suffered. My rank really was hit from going Havertz over Watkins. My biggest error last year. But I clearly see a lot from him to always back him in FPL. But a good FPL asset and good footballer aren't always the same. And with Havertz, I've always gone heart over head. And as a Chelsea fan, I remember when making the Havertz-Watkins decision, I think I tweeted something along the lines of, it's such a close call to make, but the thing that swings it for me is I'll celebrate a Havertz goal more than a Watkins goal because I want Havertz to score. And I went heart over head. And I think he's an outstanding footballer. And I think a couple of years ago, when Chelsea landed him, it was like he was being talked about the next big thing, someone that will potential Ballon d'Or winner. And obviously at Chelsea, fans have been divided on him. I have always been in the camp that he's incredible and just been playing in a out of position and struggled to nail a position in the team under a manager because different managers have been coming in with different systems. But I adore him, but I still probably don't think he's a great FPL asset because he's not that clinical in front of goal. He plays in a variety of positions, but I do think the Arsenal style will really, really suit him. And we know he's going to be slightly deeper and he will pop up in areas close to the goal. And if he's going to play that Xhaka role, and Xhaka last year, remember, was a number 8, that on that left-hand side, with Partey being the sort of DM or Jorginho, that Xhaka role last year got tons of shots. That Xhaka role last year got tons of goals. And I think Havertz is a better technical footballer than Xhaka in front of goals. So again, Havertz will have chances fall his way on that inside left channel.
Yeah. Well, the great stat actually is that Xhaka and Ødegaard were afforded the same number of big chances last season.
No way. Were they really?
Yeah, 8 each. And so I mean, obviously Ødegaard got 15 goals and he kind of overperformed his XG a little bit. But I mean, when he was 15, he was being talked about as the next big thing as well. And may well still get to that point. I mean, he's still stupidly young. Feels like he's been around a very long time. But that's because he started when he was 15. So yeah, Havertz, if he's afforded the same number of big chances, if that dynamic continues, and that's why I feel like there could be a point where I do own him, just because that saving is available. So it's very exciting times, I think, for Havertz. Perhaps as a slow burner, I'm not going to probably get him near the beginning, but yeah, it'd be nice to see him. It'd be nice for you to maybe own him later in the season and get what you deserve, which is a bit of reward for your faith in him. So fingers crossed.
Yeah, I'm definitely owed it. I think I saw Az say he was going Havertz in his first draft, but for game week 1. But I think that will change. I think I don't know if Az will follow through with that. I guess he'll want to see him pre-season, but his game week 1 draft does include Havertz. Yeah.
Wow. I love that. Well, we're going to get Az on at some point. I'm going to ask him all about Havertz when we get there. We talked a bit about Chelsea, of course, big Chelsea fan. We have to talk about Colwill on your bench because we're just sort of going to talk about the rest of your defence as a sort of general rotation from this book, because that's kind of what it looks like. We've got a Stupinian, which I feel is an obvious pick. We've got Bell as well, 4 million. How wedded are you to the pricing structure there, I guess? And I suppose you've already talked about Colwill maybe starting for Chelsea. What's your take on him? Obviously did very well out on loan last season. Do you anticipate him maybe sticking around? And I mean, you obviously just know more about the Chelsea scenario than myself. So yeah, take us away.
Chelsea made some howlers, getting rid of Mark Gabe, getting rid of Tomori, young centre-backs through the academy, been recognised by England, but not Chelsea. Colwill, for me, isn't going anywhere. And I know Brighton are offering big money for him. I'm confident he'll be part of Poch's plans. And I think genuinely there's a very good chance he's starting alongside Thiago Silva in a back 4. Now, Thiago in a 4 isn't great, but we need his leadership. So Badiashile is out and probably could miss the start of the season. Fofana has been ropey. So it could be Fofana and Thiago. It could be Colwill and Thiago. But he has got a really good chance. The slight concern might be that playing in the Euros, and he was arguably one of the players of the tournament in the under-21s, for England, means he's not going to get much of a kind of summer break / pre-season, could be shortened. But the other flip side argument to that is his base fitness will be high because he's been busy this summer and he shouldn't be suffering from exhaustion, because for Brighton last year, whilst he was great, he was rotating in and out the team with Webster. It was like Colwill starts 1 week, Webster the next. So I think there's a very good chance he's starting. I need to see pre-season minutes before I back him game week 1. But if I like what I see pre-season with regards to minutes, it's a really cheap route to a Chelsea back line, which I think will be much improved. So I'm not wedded to him in that slot, but I am wedded to the kind of structure of a 4.5 defender bench option followed by a 4 million defender bench option. So, that could be Botman and Bayer. It could be Baldock and Matt Cash, whatever. But at the moment, it's Colwell and Bell, and pre-season will determine if I stick with that.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense, and I suppose you've also talked about the fact that if you do go a different way, your route into the Chelsea defence could easily be Reece James, who I'm guessing is
Yeah.
your preferred out of him and Chilwell.
Yeah, I was looking. I think I read an article on Scout a couple of days ago, which looked at the attacking threat of both last season only, and Chilwell had the greater goal threat, which I was perhaps slightly surprised by. Shots in the box all up on Reece. Reece had the greater assist threat, but I was really surprised. Chilwell took something like 50 corners, and Reece James took something like 20 corners. So that was surprising. I really think there's very little to split Ben Chilwell and Reece James. It could be either. It could be both. Both in a 4-4-2 is something I'm like, oh, will I put together a draft that is both in a 4-4-2? Possibly. From game week 3, the Chelsea fixtures are frighteningly good. But again, we just need to see a little something from them in pre-season. Obviously, they're playing a back four under Poch. It will be 4-2-3-1. That's the Poch way. But that doesn't mean they'll be more restricted. They'll still be bombing on, as we saw at Spurs. So I like them both, but at the moment, yeah, Reece has always been my kind of go-to at Chelsea in defence. I've always had a soft spot for him, and I think when ranking defenders in years gone by, it's always been Trent, and then in the tier below, we've had Cancelo, Robertson, Reece, and Chilwell. They've been like the standout four, and I think it's amazing we could get them at 5.5 million.
Yeah, it's amazing, really. And you've also made a great comparison with Poch at Spurs as well, because Davis and Trippier did very, very well there. He was a big fan of, even in the 4-2-3-1, making sure those wing backs, they were wing backs rather than necessarily traditional fullbacks in a back four, despite the fact they were playing a back four. So, we could see more of that, which would be very exciting. Do you think the fixtures might maybe be what ultimately decides how much you're invested in Chelsea? And I suppose let's move forward into midfield a bit here, because you've got Mbeumo, we've already talked about Foden, and we'll talk about Rashford separately, because I think that's a 50-50 with Fernandes. But you've got Matoma as well. In effect, you've got some potential routes into a Sterling and Mudryk, for example. You don't have them at the moment. Are you more excited about Chelsea defenders this year, Chelsea attackers? Again, just to use the benefit of you being a Chelsea fan and having watched a lot more of them than other people, what's your feeling about the attacking options there? Are you waiting for that game week 3 fixture swing?
I don't know if I want to book in transfers. That's what I know. In game week 3, we're going to be making Chelsea transfers. They got Luton, Forest, Bournemouth. Like, what a set of 3 games. So I might just roll the dice and start with 1 or 2 in my 11. But the Chelsea players I'm interested in, I know Cole's in this team, but if I sell Trent, it'll be a Chelsea fullback, as mentioned. But then in the midfield, you mentioned Sterling and Mudryk, who are both potentially really good options at 6.5 and 7. I much prefer Sterling because we know what we're getting, at least from him. And he should be hitting his peak now. Sterling's like 27, 28. This should be prime Sterling, and he's way short. But if we see a little bit of Man City Sterling at 7 million, he could be a joke of a price. But Madueke is 5.5. And again, this could be some good under 21s tournament. It will be Madueke or Mudryk, you would think. And if it's Madueke at 5.5, yeah, what a nice option to have. I don't think I'll be starting with these guys. If I start with Chelsea players in my 11, it'll be the fullbacks. But being able to have 2 6.5 million mids in Matoma and Mbeumo to be able to move easily to one of those Chelsea mids just mentioned is a nice thing to have. And whilst I really like Matoma in this team, and I definitely want double Brighton in my 11 for the start of the season, I don't know if I need Mbeumo. I think we're blinded by possibly the coincidence of him excelling without Tony. It's quite a small sample size. In the 10 or 11 games without Tony where he scored lots of goals, it's nice, and 10 games is a good sample size, and he should be on penalties. I'm not sure we've seen a big enough sample to go, he is much better without Tony, because don't forget, Brentford are surely a lot weaker without Tony. He's not a number 9 either, and he won't play number 9. And Brentford could go and sign a number 9, or Visser can play there. So from the midfield 5, what we can see on screen, the one I'm not sold on is Mbeumo.
Yeah, it's interesting actually, because there was a massive flock towards him on the day that the game launched, and I was one of the people that did that as well. But yeah, the more we unpick some of the layers, it's obvious that he's not necessarily going to play up front unless they're playing a 5-3-2 formation, which is when he did play up front, and they usually played that against the more difficult teams. And so therefore you're sort of asking him to play in a better position when they play harder opposition, and that you don't necessarily want to rely on that. I mean, I'm going to still keep an eye on what they do in preseason, because if he does do well, then maybe I'm more excited about it. But yeah, I mean, you've talked about Brighton as well. I mean, just going to stick their fixtures back on the screen. There's a useful little swing with them, because their first few fixtures are really nice. So Brighton are hosting Luton in game week 1, away to Wolves game week 2, at home to West Ham in game week 3. And maybe the West Ham game could be okay, but if you switch to a Chelsea player in that in game week 3 to go for the Luton game, so then in effect, if you have a Brighton midfielder and then you switch to a Chelsea midfielder with that Brighton midfielder in game week 3, you get to play Luton at home twice in the first 3 game weeks, which is like not bad. So and then of course it's Forest, which is an incredible game for Chelsea as well. So there's ways and means that you can do it. But I suppose I should ask you about your views on the Brighton midfield, because there are multiple options. I've got Gross at the moment, for example. I haven't seen March in too many teams. Matoma seems to be the favourite, but at the very least, it's a 3-way coin toss for some. How is it for you? Is he a placeholder, or do you think Matoma's the best?
Matoma's in my 11, but there could be a conversation to be had. You need double Brighton attack, and if that is squeezing a Ferguson in, or a 7.5 mid in 6.5 mid in Gross or March. Now, when I look at the Brighton attack, there's kind of 4 positions, right? Let's assume it's like a 4-2-3-1. From the front 4, the only one I think is absolutely nailed is Matoma on the left. You would argue Solly March should be on the right-hand side, but don't forget, Enciso can play on the right-hand side. Could Pedro coming in get opportunities on the right? And then you look at the number 10 role, and it could be Gross, because he has played there before, although we know he's played at right back and DM2, which is perhaps where we'll see him. But then you look and think Enciso can play number 10. Lallana, who was out injured, will be back, can play number 10. Or he plays with a front 2, and it's a number 10, number 9 combination of Ferguson and Welbeck. And we've seen that a lot as well. And then even the number 9, is it Welbeck or Ferguson or both? So from all those players, and there's still some I've not even mentioned, like Buonanotte, who I think are more kind of,
And they signed James options. Milner as well, who probably isn't going to start.
And Milner,
but what an experienced head to go into that team. I'm really excited to see him at Brighton, to be honest.
So it's good business. Really good business. And I think Pedro could be good for them. So I don't know. Matoma's the safest, and arguably March is very safe too. Gross as well, but he could be slightly deeper. So I'm surprised I haven't seen Solly March in more teams, because there was so little to split March over Matoma last year, March and Matoma last year. And I was in the March camp. It was only when I doubled on the Brighton midfield I added Matoma. I was always on March, and I liked the amount of big chances that were falling his way, although his conversion wasn't great, whilst Matoma was a bit more of an overperformer of XG compared to March's underperformance. But yeah, I'm pretty sold on Matoma, mate. I think he'll be in. And I think if I looked at another one, if I saw a lot from Enciso pre-season, and I was confident of him starting kind of back-to-back games, he could have an opportunity, as could March, for the reliability. But at the moment, I think Matoma is the standout for me.
Yeah, and actually, good point. I actually forgot to mention Enciso. He's just someone else who's also just so many. We're definitely going to...
and he can play anywhere. He can play anywhere. Yeah. Like number 10, I watched him live at Arsenal at the Emirates, game week 36. It was the game where Stupinan got the have many points.
Oh, yeah.
And Enciso... March was out injured. Matoma was on the left, and Enciso was on the right, and they kept swapping all the time. And I never seen Matoma go and play on the right, but he did. And Enciso went on the left, and he caused absolute mayhem. And obviously, we've seen him play number 10 and number 9 too. So Enciso covers all 4 attacking spots.
Yeah, it's incredible. It could even get him out of position, maybe. We'll have to see, as you say. One last 50-50. Well, that wasn't a 50-50. We've joked before that picking the best Brighton attacker is like rolling a 6-sided dice rather than flipping a coin. Rashford and Fernandes, for some, is a 50-50 coin flip. You've obviously opted to spend that extra 0.5. Do you think that that's going to get you... you're getting bang for your buck by spending that extra money? If you need 0.5, how averse would you be to getting Bruno? So what's your thinking between these two?
When they revealed Bruno's price, FPL 8.5, I remember saying to myself, that's a lock. That's a lock in my game with one team. And then we saw Rashford at 9, and it was like, okay. Because I thought maybe they'd be both 9.5. I don't know. I think what Ten Hag's trying to do with that midfield is quite clear now in a 4-3-3. By signing Mason Mount, I think it's very clear he wants to play a DM with 2 number 8s. And I think it will be Bruno and Mount either side of Casemiro. And with that, will we see Bruno's defensive responsibilities increase a little bit from when we've seen him playing as a kind of out and out 10, or even sort of we've seen him wide on the right, and we've seen him very close to playing as a kind of to the striker. And it's almost looked like two strikers at time in years gone by with Bruno. But I do think we're going to see a 4-3-3 with him as a box-to-box 8. And with that, more defensive responsibility. And at times last season, he was United's best player playing as a number 8 with that defensive responsibility. So whilst he will still get tons of chances and create a ton playing as a number 8, because he's exceptional, I just like the fact that Rashford's that little bit closer to the goal always, whether he's playing wide left or as the number 9. And I think I prefer him wide left, even for FPL. Don't think Rashford playing number 9 is necessarily better for him. I don't think it is. I just like the fact he'll be closer to the goal and get probably more chances and probably higher shot volume. So Rashford's kind of worth the extra 0.5. If there was $1 million in it, it'd be Bruno. It's a really tight call.
Yeah. I know what you mean actually about Rashford being better on the wing, because I mean, some of the caveats I'm seeing people put out there is that, you know, United might sign a striker. I mean, Harry Kane has been talked about. I mean, that's probably wishful thinking at this point, but at the very least, they're in the market for one. And if they get one, maybe Rashford will play out wide. But certainly in the years when I've had the opportunity to really drill down into the numbers on Rashford, I can remember times when I was, you know, late on a Saturday night, having watched Man United play when I was in the editorial department for Scout, and my work was simply just to have a look at how he compared as a centre forward versus as a winger. And when he plays centre forward, sometimes it's not. I don't want to say it's easy to mark him out of the game. Because he's not a small lad, but he's not a big lad either. He's not a Lukaku who can necessarily counter-bully another centre-back, for example. If he's going to get marked out of a game by a big, strong centre-back, that is going to be less beneficial for him than that opportunity to go and occupy some space on the left-hand side, give the fullback a difficult time, but then also what he's really good at is penalty box entries from that area where it's harder to pick up because the fullback has to come with him, potentially pulls the defence out of shape, and if he does go on to one of those centre-backs from a wider position, that centre-back's only got the split second to be like, oh, Matt, he's come in the box now. That's harder for them to defend than being able just to stand on him. So if he does play out wide, that, as you say, could still be actually beneficial to him, even if they do sign another striker.
Yeah. Like I like Rashford with his facing the goal, not with his back to goal. And if he's playing number 9, he'll often find himself with his back to goal. And he's not that sort of striker that's going to roll a defender and get a shot off. He wants to run in behind and he wants to face defenders up with a bit more space. So I hope as an FPL option we see him wide left, and I think we will, because United are going to buy a striker. And even if they don't, Martial is still around and we'll get some game time. But I prefer him to Bruno. I think there's a really good argument to go with both, because United, I think, are going to have a very good season and they're both incredible FPL assets. And Luke Shaw too. And if Onana comes into the game at 5 million, then I think a lot will flock to him. And I think De Gea was priced at 5, and I think Onana will be the same. So again, I think United will get a lot of love. They always do, because there's more United fans of FPL teams than any other club. So you have to look at that United tax, a little bit like the transfer market. When you're selling to Man United, you get an extra 5-10%. Well, in FPL, when you're buying a United player, you get an extra 5-10% in ownership on some of those popular assets.
Yeah, that's very true. I've just actually recorded a video this morning about Fernandes and Rashford, and pretty much came to the same conclusion you did, is that actually owning both could be really tasty, especially if the fixtures line up. It's probably difficult to justify that at the start because they've got some really nice home fixtures. Wolves and Forest are their first two, but they've also got Spurs away, Arsenal away in the first two. So probably just one is enough for now. But when we get a really healthy run, we're going to look at them. When we get double game weeks, I think having both is going to be really tasty. So yeah, I'm looking forward to having the opportunity to do that. Let's push into your forwards now, and I suppose in many ways this is a template part of your team, and I've put that in inverted commas because that's not in any way criticism, because I think this is a very sensible way to go to start with. It's exactly the front two I've got. Haaland, we don't really need to talk about. Jesus is the most expensive of the players in the bracket where we feel like the second striker will come from this year, so you can step down to some others. I suppose we've already talked about triple Arsenal, so I guess I got your thoughts on that. I suppose the opportunity for you to maybe go in Kunku for 7.5, because to bring it back to Chelsea again, we haven't talked about him yet, and he's looks like could have a good year. You famously had Darwin last season for his red card as well. I'll never forget the unfortunate nature of you bringing him in for that. So, there's players in that bracket who you have owned before and will almost certainly have, at the very least, a strong opinion either way on. So what's your thinking on that second striker slot?
I was big on Darwin last year. I was big on Werner year before and probably the year before that. Like I'm not. I can easily be sold on going on a new striker to the league early on. Like I did it with Werner, I did it with Darwin, and I could easily do it with Nkunku. Then his numbers are so good. Looking at his where he's played at Leipzig last season, I think he only played as the out and out number 9 4 times, but he got something like 4 goals in that time. He played mostly as a second striker in kind of a number 10 role, but you can also play out wide too. And Kunku's penalty record's amazing, and Chelsea have lost Jorginho and Havertz, the two takers. So it should be Nkunku on pens. It could even be Reece James, by the way, on pens. So do watch out for that. But if pre-season tells us who's on penalties and it's Nkunku, then you can look at it and say, well, Jesus 8 million not on pens and Nkunku 7.5 on pens, both playing for good teams, blah, blah, blah. I still think I'd end up with Gabby Jesus just because it's tried and tested. And I know I'm getting an out and out 9. And I know the Arsenal fixtures are amazing. But Nkunku is on my mind, and he might be someone we move to come game week 3, 4 when the fixtures improve a little bit. I don't see myself starting the season with him because of Jesus. And I can't go to a 3-4-3 because there's so many good midfield options. I think we need a midfield 5. I'm struggling to think of ways in which I could accommodate a front 3, and I can't really see myself doing it. If I was to go to another formation that wasn't 3-5-2, it would probably be 4-4-2 because there's also so many good defenders at that 5.5 price point. So I think it'll be Haaland, Jesus. I guess a third striker slot is up for grabs. And that could be a 6 million option if you get the money by selling a Trent and you have a better sub 1 and your sub 1 is a 6 million or a 5.5 striker. I don't mind some of those 5.5, 6 million options. Visser is 6 million, for example. If I didn't have Mbomo and they didn't sign a striker, Visser at 6 is an option. Ferguson at 6 million, I do really like. I'm just a little bit worried about starting successive games. And when I look at the Brighton fixtures, I just worry about how much De Zerbi likes to rotate. Although he's definitely in their best 11, of course he is, but that doesn't mean he's going to start 3 games on the bounce like Matoma will. So yeah, there's a few options there, but I do think striker 1 and striker 2 are probably fixed. But Nkunku could blow us away pre-season and then we have our heads turned.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm anticipating that as well. I'm like yourself. I'm very excited to see what he can do in the Premier League this year because the numbers he's bringing here from the Bundesliga are very exciting. And if you've not had the opportunity already to check out the scout report we've done on him on site and also on YouTube, do watch that because you will get a lot of envy and you might even have your head turned before Casa Amor of Game Week 3. So make sure you check out that and get very excited about it. One last quick word, I suppose, on your final player right in the corner of the bench we've not talked about is Cameron Archer. We've kind of already touched on the third striker. He's there at the moment. He is actually emerging as the most popular at the moment. And what I'm enjoying is that people's reasons behind their third striker are usually quite irrational and nothing to do with FPL because we're not really expecting these guys to play, right?
Yeah, it's kind of a dead spot. I don't like dead spots in an ideal world, but how likely is it I'm going to need my third sub in the first 6 game weeks? I don't think I'm going to need them. So I don't want to waste money. And this is a streamlined bench because I think most of my 11 are playing week in, week out. And when they're not, I'll have a good sub 1 that's reliable. And maybe that's not Colwill because maybe he won't be reliable and pre-season will tell us that. But that could be a botman that, can always come in or whatever. So I'm all right with Cameron Archer. There might be a 4.5 option that emerges that gets a loan move. Let's say Balogun gets a loan move to West Ham. And they are, I think, 8-1 to get him after the window. If Balogun was at West Ham at 4.5, he's in everyone's team. Or if he's at Crystal Palace, who I think are also 8-1. But Cameron Archer, I guess the hope is that he gets a loan. He's done so well when he's been out in the Championship. Is he going to get minutes at Villa this time round? Maybe he is the Watkins backup. But if he's not seen as the Watkins direct backup and he gets a loan move, then again, he's a good option to have. But I'm not fussed too much about that third spot on the bench because I don't expect to need them.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I said, if you get the opportunity to pick someone there just for bants, like why not? Yeah. So don't rule that out. I would suggest to people because your fifth midfielder would normally be someone who you actually envisage ever playing, whereas right now a 4.5 million striker very much is just a dead asset. So just have a laugh with it, guys. Have a laugh with it.
There's loads of 4.5 mids can come in and get you your 2 points. They're minutes men. There isn't any 4.5 million forwards that we can safely say are going to start. I think there might be a 5 million forward that has a good chance of starting. Am I right in thinking the Luton have got an option up front? Is it Adebayo? I think it's got a good chance of starting games.
Yeah.
But then that means an extra 0.5 for a third sub spot. I'm not going to waste that.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So it makes sense just to sort of leave someone there and to see what happens, really. And just probably, and the thing is, all your transfers are going to get used on jumping on and off midfield bandwagons anyway. So
yeah,
that seems to be where the money is going to flow in the early weeks of the season. So yeah. There we are. But yeah, thanks very much for joining us, Gianni. It's been brilliant to chat through your team. Before we do finish, another opportunity for us to just plug the Fantasy Football Scout members area. Now is the time to sign up. 30% off, up to 30% you can save if you use the pre-season prices. We've talked through many of the benefits in this video. If you want some more information, head to the website and get more details there and sign up for the package that is right for you. Don't forget also to make sure that you have liked this video and subscribe to the YouTube channel as well. Hit that bell notification. It all helps build Fantasy Football Scout as we head into the new campaign, but also make sure that you don't miss a single thing. We're going to have loads of other team reveals like this. There's going to be plenty more of Gianni on the channel as well. We're going to hear his thoughts in the lead up to Game Week 1 and from Game Week 1 and beyond. So I'm guessing you're looking forward to a bit more content now that you've had your break. You ready to kick on?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to another season with Scout. Like, great to have I put a jokey tweet out, like a 12-month extension. Like, I think I've been doing Scout videos for, I don't know, must be my fourth, maybe even fifth season. But yeah, it's great. I think that it's always a slightly different angle every year, and we evolve the Scout content, don't we? So I'm delighted to be able to do a Sunday night stream with Ali Hangarov, who I know you've done a team selection or some top tips video with already, and Ali's such an amazing FPL mind. So I'm really excited to have kind of a weekly video with Ali. Not only world number one last year, obviously that's amazing, but when you look at world number ones in years gone by, sometimes they've just had this one unbelievable season. Well, Ali finished 215th the season before that. Like, I'm delighted to be talking with him on a weekly basis as we kind of break down the game week we've just seen. So yeah, it'll be loads of fun.
Yeah, it's going to be really, really cool. Super looking forward to it. As you say, I mean, what a signing to make. Just in terms of his history, but also don't do yourself down, Gianni. A great signing to have you alongside him as well. I think people are really going to enjoy that. So yeah, we are absolutely looking forward to it. Well, with that, I'll leave you fine, folks, to enjoy the rest of your tinkering with your teams, and we will see you next time.